Okay, so returning back to our theme and outline, just showing you kind of some amazing footage there that I pulled off of Fox News sites on the fires and the smoke and so on. Kind of amazing, terrifying, but amazing stuff. Um, I Let's return our attention to where we were. I kind of stumbled through that last bit a little bit because I wasn't quite sure where I had the language in there about how unusual this event was. But in scientific terminology, an 8 standard deviation event is pretty much unheard of. So extremely, extremely, extremely unlikely. It's kind of like the epsilon that you might have learned about in math somewhere along the way. Um, so in a few months, there will probably be some scholarly paper in the works for this event, the wind event itself, due to its highly unusual nature and magnitude. But obviously, that's not going to help us here. So I just wanted to share that with you. Am I being alarmist? Am I being kind of extreme in the way I'm seeing it? I don't know. I just know that that's highly unusual. I can tell you, and I've lived in the Pacific Northwest almost all my life, and never been anything like that time of year. You can get that in the winter. Yes, you can get big easy wind events in early September. I've actually sailed them in the western part of the Columbia River Gorge, winds from the east. But they didn't extend all the way out in this way with this kind of magnitude like what we saw. Is nothing even close to that um, in my limited lifetime of over half a century. So interesting. Anyway, we'll see how that goes, and maybe next year the students will get a little more refined look at what actually happened there. Um, so I want to then, in this whole question about causation of forest fires, I want to extend a special thank you to President Abraham Lincoln. He had the foresight to realize that in managing a country's affairs, there are many, many circumstances, issues, events where you need to have the very best scientific advice possible for the government to use. And even more so now, that's true as we've gone into a even more complex kind of society. And so he called for and signed a bill establishing the National Academies of Sciences, from here in which I will use NAS to as an abbreviation for that, which is charged with providing independent, objective advice to the nation on matters related to science and technology, to provide science to the government whenever called upon by any government department. So, any public policy, whether it be about climate change, forest management, or anything else that is not informed by the best available science, is likely to produce substandard outcomes. This is something that Lincoln understood, and this is something that we as a society, in fact, have built much of our kind of economic success has been based on very solid science. Yes, we've made mistakes. Yes, science will continue to make mistakes, but that's the good thing about science, that if you've got enough evidence, you can overthrow a particular point of view on a topic, that there's never a completely settled question in science. It's how it works. It's a community of people looking at the available evidence and doing their very best to understand how things work. So, fortunately, we have some guidance from the National Academies of Science about the causes of the increased forest fire activity in the western United States. Just kind of bold print, one of the conclusions from the article that I have linked up here, and that is human caused climate change is now a key driver of forest fire activity in the United States. The linked research demonstrates that human caused climate change caused half of the documented increases in fuel aridity since the 1970s and doubled the cumulative forest fire area since 1984. Okay, so that's a big statement, and that's a fairly recent one that came out in 2016 based on data up through probably late 2015, maybe early into 2016. So the data are already 5 years old. I would imagine that there'll be newer summary studies of the scientific consensus on these kinds of questions in the wake of the extreme fires that we've seen in the West in the last few years since 2016. So the article that I'm talking about, I have linked here. Oh, it says the request isn't valid. I tried it earlier, it was, so I'm going to go and before I post this for you, I will get that to work, okay? But in any case, here is the questions that I have. Here are the questions I have for you. So there is basically, it's an article brief. It's not very long at all. It's probably equivalent of a couple textbook pages at the most. So read the NAS guidance article brief reference in the previous paragraph and answer the following questions. So the first one, trends of increasing area burn in the Western United States have been blamed on various factors, but rigorous attribution has yet to materialize. What that means is, to what can we attribute this increasing area burn? That's what attribution means. In other words, what's the cause? Why? Okay. What is the first example in the article about bark beetles all about in relation to forest fire causation? Discuss the three hypotheses and the strength of scientific evidence about them. Okay, so that's the first one. And the second question from that is, just right afterwards, you'll find this. In what two related environments is there some evidence for this with the likelihood of extreme fires? Discuss. Describe the other two environmental types that have been least or less affected by fire suppression and management. Okay. And then finally, number 3, giving correct answers to the above questions. And from what the article says is, what is the elephant in the room? So what are they talking about? Okay. Then I make a little summary statement here. The referenced literature states that forest management is to some degree responsible for increases in fires in recent decades, especially low elevation and drier forest zones. Herein lies the predicament. Much of the land burned is public land. The U.S. Forest Service has been spending a greater and greater part of its budget on fire control rather than forest management. See, so as we have more and more fires every year, a bigger and bigger part of the total Forest Service budget is tied up just on dealing with fires. So yes, the growth in fires is robbing budgets to do the preventative things to reduce fire risk in the first place. So then here's this kind of a discussion question, something to think about. Maybe we'll do a forum on this even. What do you think should be done with federal budget policy to address this problem? Okay. So that's just kind of the gist of this whole thing. And these asterisks here, you can kind of follow up on what those are about. Okay. So that's all I have for you on this YouTube.